Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and do an in-service virtually on the Aquilex and MyoSure unit. And I will just walk you through a standard setup and then priming as best I can. I do not have a saline bag, I'm in my garage, but we'll get through this. So a couple of first things, you have your Aquilex fluid management system, which has 4 Bemis canisters on the bottom and vacuum tubing on the back, which we'll get to that in just a second. You also have a MyoSure tissue removal unit. These are 2 separate units, but they can be used together or separately. So we'll start with the priming and setup of the Aquilex system, and then when there is pathology or tissue to be removed, that is when this system is turned on. So let's start on the back here with your vacuum tubing. So you have your low side vacuum and your high side vacuum. Notice that the low side is white and the high side is green. This is going to make it very simple. All of your green is always going to be on this side of the Aquilex system. This vacuum tubing is always going to stay connected there, and it's always going to be connected to the vacuum ports on these back canisters, okay? So I'll go ahead and connect those there. So low side connected to the vacuum port. This green high side has a green end tubing, and it's gonna be connected to this back vacuum. You can see it's upside down, but vacuum port right there, okay? So those are always going to be connected. Those are replaced once every 6 months or so, and I typically can help you guys with that ordering. So you shouldn't have to worry about this on a day-to-day. Otherwise, you then will have tandem tubing, which you can see I have set up right here. Sometimes these are already on your machine. Sometimes they were used in a previous case, so you have to replace them. So your vacuum ports, like I said, are always going to your vacuum port right there. Your tandem tubing is always gonna go to that tandem port right there. So I'll connect that tandem tubing right there, and it tandems over to the front tandem. So you can see what I'm doing. So vacuum to vacuum, tandem to tandem. We're gonna do that 2 times on both sides of the device. Tandem over to tandem. So you can see we have got vacuum to vacuum, tandem to tandem, and next are gonna be your patient ports right here. And we'll get to that in just a second. What's important now is to make sure that you put your tissue sock in. Your tissue sock is what is gonna collect the specimen that the MyoSure collects. So MyoSure is green, that's your MyoSure device. MyoSure is green, so it's going to go on your green side. See, we've got our green there. Don't forget our green vacuum port right there. Green, green, MyoSure green. Because when you connect your MyoSure device, see that little green tubing right there? That will go there, but we will get to that. So we've got our tissue sock in there. So next, we've got everything hooked up here. We need to make sure that every single port is closed. So I'm gonna set you guys down here. See if I can get a little closer. Set you down there while I close every single other port. It's important that you check to see that every single canister is completely closed. Otherwise, and all the ports are closed, otherwise you will not get the suction that you need. If you're not getting suction, something's hooked up incorrectly or something's not closed off. So we're gonna go ahead and close all these ports, which I will show you in a second what it looks like. Okay. All right. Everything closed up. My little vacuum port popped off here. I'm just gonna put that back on. Okay. Everything is closed except for this tissue sock, which is where MyoSure will ultimately go, and this patient port right here. And it's easy to remember, patient to patient. So that's gonna go to the patient's under buttock drape. So we'll hook that up shortly. I'm gonna walk you through the setup of the scope and then where the tubing goes on the actual Aquilex machine. We can go ahead now that all of our canisters are set up correctly, which you should have a photo for reference. So vacuum to vacuum, tandem to tandem, and then 2 patient ports, patient to go to patient. So we'll walk through that, but we can turn on our Aquilex machine. It's gonna run a check, and then it should say system check. Okay, once it turns on. System check running, system okay. So we are good. So next, let's see how I can get y'all the best view of the scope setup. All right. So next, we've got our scope setup. Well, actually, we'll go ahead and start with setting up our tubing. So we've got 2 sets of tubing. Yellow, you see your yellow, that's your outflow tubing. And then blue, as you can see there, that's your blue inflow tubing. The way that I remember that is yellow is like urine. Urine goes out, that's your outflow. Blue is like water, it's clean, it goes in. So a couple things to remember about these tubing sets are, you've got, this is where you're gonna spike your bag, of course. Follow that to this little cartridge. It's got an arrow on it. So we're gonna start there. And this arrow is going to match up with that arrow right there. So as you can see, again, I've got this arrow right here. It lines up with that arrow right there. It slides right in just like that. So it slid in there. We then take this tubing set around and you pull it until it hooks just like that, okay? And then you've got this and it will go to your bag, which will be spiked and hung right there. So we're gonna pretend to have a bag. So then this of course is staying sterile, and that's going to the inflow port on your scope, which we'll walk through that in a second. Next, you have your outflow tubing. So the outflow tubing, you've got the port that will connect to the scope right there. And then you have 2 other ends of the tube. So the way that I remember this is that this yellow has the clamp. So we can shut it off if we need to. That's gonna be what connects to the patient's under buttocks drape, this yellow one. So if we needed to close the under buttocks drape, we could clamp it. Otherwise, this white one is gonna go to the patient port on this side, because that's what's coming from the patient. This is what's coming out of the patient's under buttocks drape, because this part right here is going to be connected to the patient's under buttocks drape, okay? So, for our setup, again, I'll go over this a couple times. We have our vacuum to our vacuum port, our tandem to our tandem port, and then we have a patient port right here with MyoSure. And then again on this side, we have our vacuum to our vacuum port, our tandem to our tandem port, and then patient to the patient port. So we're gonna walk through the setup of this scope here, and then how to hook up MyoSure. All right, I hope you can see this. So, this is the Omniscope. Again, we've gone over this with an Inservice, but you have the scope, 3 interchangeable sheets, and then 2 outflow channels. For standard, you'll want to go ahead and just stick with the blue sheet unless it's posted as a myomectomy. So we're gonna grab the blue sheet, or the tech is, the scope, and then there are triangles. There's a triangle right there, and a triangle on the scope right there. As you can see, we're gonna line those triangles up, push down on the thumb tab while we're connecting, and then they're connected. So you have your scope, and then because we are using the blue sheath, we're going to use the outflow channel that is not color-coded. So for demonstration purposes, I'm not going to open my scope seals, but you put a scope seal in the back of the outflow channel, dome side down, and then a scope seal in the back of this, again, dome side down, and then you'll slide the outflow channel down the back of the scope and you have your scope set up. So remember we talked about blue inflow, yellow outflow. So your yellow is going to go, don't do that, just stuck. So your yellow is going to go to your outflow channel on the back of the scope. And then your blue, again, don't do that. Blue is going to go to your inflow channel on the front of your scope. So outflow channel, yellow, inflow channel, blue. For priming purposes, you are going to close your blue. Try and show you. That is closed. And open, or I'm sorry, close your yellow and then open your blue. So that is open in line with the tubing, and that is closed for yellow. So blue open, yellow closed, and then we're gonna prime into a basin, preferably, okay? So this scope is now set up. So we're gonna pretend like this is being pointed into a basin, being held by the scrub tech, and while we're priming. So I'll walk you through priming. So now that everything is hooked up, again, this will be connected to your bag of saline. So at that point, everything's set up correctly to your scope. This is connected to your under buttock drape. You will then, it will tell you what to do. Press the prime button. So we would then click prime, which I can't push prime. Well, I can't prime it because I do not have saline, but it will run until it dings again and it tells you calibration is complete, which at that point you would push pause once it tells you that calibration is complete, and you will come over here and you will have a number here, and that will be what was excreted during the priming. So we need to go ahead and zero that out. So you hold the 0 button down until this number returns to 0, because you want to start every procedure with a deficit of 0. Once that is done, you will then push resume when the physician is ready, and then they have the ability to control the fluid from their stopcock, their inflow stopcock right there. It's important not to let your saline bag run out, because it will make your deficit climb very quickly, because this is calculating milliliters with every single turn, even if water's not going through there, because the bag might be empty. So don't ever let that bag run out, or else your deficit will be inaccurate. So once the physician has identified pathology and would like to use MyoSure to remove pathology or to get a sample of the tissue, is when you will open the MyoSure device. We'll make sure that the MyoSure machine is turned on. The MyoSure device will be opened. You have two ends. This end will, well, you have the device itself, which will go to the physician, and then you have a tubing end and a plug end. Notice the arrow on this plug end, and I'll show you how to plug it in. So arrow facing upward, you will then insert this right into there. I use my foot until it clicks, okay? And then this part, this is the MyoSure tubing, goes to that MyoSure device. Because this will collect sample, you need a tissue sock to collect that sample. Now keep in mind, if this machine is running while you're hooking up MyoSure, Aquilex is gonna pause when these canisters are touched, and that's fine. When the physician's ready to go in with their MyoSure into the scope, all the circulator needs to do is push resume, and the pump will resume. So we have our MyoSure hooked up to the tissue sock, our tandems to our tandems, and our vacuum to our vacuum. Again, this is for the under buttocks drape, coming from the patient, tandem to tandem, vacuum to vacuum. So now we have MyoSure hooked up, and the physician, all they'll do at this point, I'm gonna set you down one more time. The physician will be at the patient, okay? They'll remove their outflow channel, keeping it sterile. They can put it in the under buttock straight, wherever they would like. They will then take this MyoSure device, becomes their new outflow channel, and they'll slide it down the back of the scope, and then they're ready to operate. MyoSure has continuous suction. If they have issue with visibility, they just need to advance the MyoSure device to the fundus and wait for 5 Mississippi seconds, and that will help clear their field of view. If they still don't have good visibility after that, they can remove MyoSure, go back in and clear their field of view with their outflow channel by adjusting the outflow channel here, and then go back in with MyoSure to continue operating. So that is the setup of Aquilex, MyoSure, and the Omniscope. And I'm going to make sure I have a bunch of this written down for you for step-by-step instructions on how to prime. All right. Once you get the hang of it, I promise it won't take 16 minutes. It can go very quickly. So we'll get through it. Thanks, guys.